Hello and welcome to this week's myNewsWrap. News from the world of SAP, Microsoft, and somewhere in between. Let's get started. I have quite some stuff this week. Also, we have a short week here in Germany with quite some public holidays. Nevertheless, quite some stuff happened in the last week. So let's dive into the topics. First of all, the Ask Us Anything SAP Business Technology Platform video cast was executed this week. I announced it last week, so I think it took place on Wednesday. You can watch the replay on YouTube. Now, well, it was kind of, from my perspective, a misleading title because it was not about asking questions and getting into big interaction with the audience, at least what I saw from the replay. But it was more or less talking about the business technology platform and all the I would say, marketing stuff like robotic process automation, business process intelligence, acquisition of AppGyver, so low-code, no-code topics, and not that much of focusing what really the audience asked. At least that was my impression from the replay. What was interesting, or what is interesting, and if you watch it, if you don't listen to it as a pure audio stream, there is one remark of the SAP technology channel that if there have been questions that have not been answered, there will be a follow-up afterwards with the experts. But to be honest, I don't know how this should work. So I think it would be a great format to really allow the audience, allow partners, customers to ask questions in such a format. The way it was executed the first time now, I doubt that this is really a success. But that's my personal opinion. Take a look at the video and get your own opinion. Now let's get back to the technical stuff. There was one announcement this week that was already hoped for quite some time because of the renaming of the SAP Cloud Platform, the business to business technology platform. All the solution diagrams that have been provided by SAP have been kind of outdated. And now at the end of March, there was an update by Bertram Ganz on this stencils and icons for drawing the solution diagrams. So it's now all business technology platform branded. That's great. And there is also one super cool contribution from my perspective by Ronnie Sletta, who brought the stencils that are available for PowerPoint, for example, to a custom Draw.io library. So if you're using Draw.io, go to the GitHub repository of Ronnie and check out his custom library. So you're not stuck to use PowerPoint in order to draw your solution diagrams. That's cool, and that's highly appreciated. Then another topic around the business technology platform. There is one blog post by Wouter Lemaire. I have referenced him already quite some times, and this is kind of the third part of his blog post series around splitting an MTA application into backend and front end. How you can do that with respect to well, now I lost the point. The app router, of course. So how can you split the application if you have a managed app router, if you have an unmanaged app router? And this blog post kind of rounds it up or sums it up and gives you some kind of decision matrix for how to deal with splitting your MTA and how to compose all that stuff. So finalizing his 3-part blog post series. Then we have another blog post around making use of the Business Application Studio and calling APIs on the Business Technology Platform out of the Business Application Studio. So I guess you certainly know how to use Postman in order to do that. But if you're using VS Code, you may also know the REST client, which is a super powerful extension within Visual Studio Code that allows you to build up all the REST calls in a in a text-based fashion. And this blog post walks you through how to use the REST client and execute OAuth through the authorization flows. And the good news is that the REST client is part of the standard setup of the Business Application Studio dev spaces. So you do not have to install something else. You just can use it out of the box. Of course, all the stuff that is written down here can also be transferred to VS Code if you do not want to use Business Application Studio, but want to use the REST client, which from my perspective is highly recommended. Yeah, so that's it for the business technology platform. Let's switch to the cloud application programming model. And there have been two points that I want to highlight. Point one by Christoph Szymanski, who is, I think, heading the CI/CD DevOps topics at SAP. And there is one new announcement concerning the continuous delivery pipeline that is relevant for cloud application programming model. First of all, you can now do the configuration on an UI-based way, so you do not have to edit the YAML files. And the second one, you can build Node.js-based apps without using MTA. So that's, I think, good, because nobody, or you do not always need MTAs if you want to deploy CAP-based applications. And now the SAP CI/CD service takes care of that. Then another point that is really cool and I think brings several puzzle pieces together. That's a blog post that describes how to extend the SAP One Domain model using the CDS graphical modeler. So that's really, really cool. It makes use of the Business Application Studio, of course, because this is kind of very special use case, but it really walks you through the through all the details and the steps that you need to do in order to extend a standard service that has an ODM model lying underneath, and how to bring in custom fields. So that's, from my perspective, super helpful and kind of shows where the direction is going when the ODM model is finally released and really available in the wild. But if you want to already make your hands dirty with that, I highly recommend this blog post that I, of course, referenced in the show notes. Then one blog post around Kyma crossed my path. It's about how to deploy a multi-service that is containerized, that is running on Docker to Kyma. And there's one special flavor within this blog post. It's about you have set up your application as a multi-service application. So you have several containers running, and you have done some Docker Compose action in order to I wouldn't say orchestrate them, but to compose them running on your local environment. And now you want to deploy that to Kubernetes, which acts differently than Docker Compose. And this blog post describes the way how to do that. And there is one quite important and helpful link in there that tells you how you can transfer your Docker Compose YAML file to YAML files that you can use in order to make your deployment to Kubernetes. And the tool used there is called Compose. So it's K at the beginning, of course. And this kind of separates your Docker file into your Docker Compose file into the different YAML files that you need in order to make the deployment to Kubernetes. So that comes in quite handy, I think, for some scenarios that you might be dealing with. Now, with that, I would like to switch to the Microsoft part of the house. And of course, first to Azure Functions. And for that, for those who watch the video, I switch back. As you can see here, I'm wearing my special Azure Functions shirt by Mark Duker, 8-bit function symbol. And that has a reason, because Azure Functions have had their 5th birthday this week. So Azure Functions are now around for 5 years. And that's cool. That in the same week that they have their birthday, Microsoft is named leader in the Forrester Wave for Function as a Service platforms, especially with focus on developer experience, which is absolutely the case, and also stateful workloads. This is kind of a quite important topic in the Functions as a Service area, because things are evolving and you want to model stateful workloads, and that's kind of hard if you have to do that on your own. And this is where durable functions come into play, and that's great that this is here recognized by Forrester in this prize that they or in this recognition that they brought out. Yeah, then I want to highlight another blog post around Azure Functions and .NET 5. As I have already mentioned, I think in the last 3 sessions, that there are changes when you deal with Azure Functions and the .NET area, and you switch from .NET Core to .NET Core 3.1 to .NET 5. And this blog post summarizes the changes quite nicely, and also show you what you have to do in your code, and how things might evolve on the roadmap when it comes to .NET 6 and beyond. Then, fitting to the recognition of durable function, there is one cool feature that the durable function team now activated in their GitHub repo, and that's GitHub discussions. So you can now do discussions all around durable functions and the durable function extension right in the GitHub repository. That's great from my perspective. That's really great stuff, and let's see how things evolves. And I hope that also other repos like the one for Azure Static Web Apps will also follow down that path, if this is a successful model. I mean, that has to be proven, especially when it comes to interaction in the wild. Yeah, that's, I think, it from the Azure Functions part. So let's switch gears and go to the, let's say, more generic area, what happened around Microsoft Azure. And there was one blog post that I would like to highlight, and that's around key design principles when you set up an enterprise scale architecture. So if you're really dealing with bigger deployments and evolving deployments that grow as you go, then this blog post I think is really helpful, and especially the links that are in there, because it really touches a lot of points that you have to keep in mind when you design such enterprise scale architectures, like, of course, identity access management, but also management groups and the subscription organization. This is something that you maybe do not think right from day one, but is very important in order to be able to grow in a sustainable manner on Azure. Then I want to highlight a blog post that is not brand new, but I came across it this week because I was attending Azure Developer College, and one of the coaches referenced the blog post from there, and it's his blog post. It's partly cloudy, thoughts on cloud native stuff. That's a blog post by Christian Denning, one of the cloud solution architects of Microsoft. And if you are doing quite some stuff around Azure Kubernetes Service, I think this blog post might be quite helpful for you. Then, in the area of DevOps, there are also some things that came out in the last weeks. One thing is that's not brand new, but I missed it. So I highlighted it this week. There is a series on the Azure DevOps Lab YouTube channel around the way from on-premise to the cloud, how to get started, how to lift and shift things, how to deploy your infrastructure as code. And well, there are now 5 videos out there. Unfortunately, there is no YouTube playlist for that, so I created one myself. and reference that. So if you are interested in that stuff, I think those are quite some nice crisp videos giving you an insight how to go down the path from on-premise to the cloud when it comes to infrastructure. Then in the area of infrastructure, there is another announcement that came out this week. I already referenced quite some times Azure Bicep, which is an abstraction layer on the ARM templates, the Azure Resource Manager templates that allow you to deploy your infrastructure, your services in Azure. Azure Bicep is a way to abstract the, let's say, not so nice notation of ARM templates, but it's ARM specific, so it's not like Terraform. And there is now another tool that came out, an extension for your PowerShell that's called PSARM. It's in preview. That allows you to create ARM templates out of your PowerShell. So if you are a PowerShell geek, black belt, well, this might be quite worth to look at, because I think then the hurdle to create ARM templates, if you're already quite familiar with PowerShell, that's quite low, and this can be quite helpful. So it can be seen as an I would say not an alternative, but kind of another way how to deal with ARM templates. Then Microsoft was quite busy around the area of Kubernetes. So this week there have been 3 announcements around the Azure Kubernetes service about features that are in preview, like node image auto upgrade or open service mesh that I want to highlight. I referenced the filtered updates from Azure. Yeah, I think currently there is quite some traffic, some speed in the area of Azure Kubernetes service. So if you're working in that area, take a look at the announcements, because I think especially the open service mesh, but also the node image auto upgrade is quite some cool stuff. Then another blog post that I think is really important came out this week around securing containerized environments. And Microsoft provides a threat matrix for Kubernetes in that area. And I referenced the blog post that highlights that one. And I think that's really important when you deal with Kubernetes, because currently Kubernetes is quite on vogue since quite some time. And it's super flexible. You can do a lot of things there. But I think what's often forgotten from the side of the developers is that you pay a price for that. And the price for that is really, you have to think, you have to wrap your head around security in Kubernetes, because it can become, or it will become quite complex. And you really have to think about, how do I do, for example, the management of my credentials? Or how do I harden my containers? Because I'm responsible for the containers. And this threat matrix kind of guides you, or gives you guidance with respect what do you have to think about. So that's super helpful. And then there is another blog post available only in German from the Heise magazine around container images. That's also a quite interesting read, because I think one point that is a fair point that speaks for example, Cloud Foundry is you have those build packs, and you can just throw in your code into Cloud Foundry more or less, and then Cloud Foundry runs your code. That's different in Kubernetes, but there is quite some action going on in that area that allows you to come closer to this, let's say, paradigm to deploy your code also into Kubernetes on this packaged way. So this blog post kind of highlights the current notion of cloud native build packs, but heavily focuses also on Spring Boot. So it's more the Java perspective, but I think it's a quite interesting read. And then one further news, the Azure Communication Services are now general available. So you can now really use them in a fully productive manner. And I think that's quite cool when it comes especially to SAP and Microsoft integrations, because now you can make use of team-like functionality without having to integrate teams. That's really, really interesting. You also have SMS capabilities in there. So that's something that I think that we will see quite some uptake in the area of SAP and Microsoft. Now with that, that's a perfect segue to the next topic, away from Microsoft to the world in between SAP and Microsoft. Unfortunately, I only have one news there, and that's the SAP on Azure video podcast that came out last week, which was, again, one more for the more application development, for the operations guys, but making use of Power Apps and Power Flow in order to manage your SAP systems. And of course, that one I highlighted already, the blog post was by Martin Pankratz, who presented that stuff. And yeah, that's, I think, really cool, and a cool scenario for bringing together both worlds, not only on a business process level. So not only making your business processes work smoother by combining SAP and Microsoft, but shows the power of the tools that Microsoft brings to the table in order to make your life easier also in the operations area. And that's really great things. And yeah, I mean, Power Platform per se is a low-code platform, so you do not have to dive into the real depth of the code, although you have to know quite some things in order to shut down SAP systems in a safe manner, not just change the switch and kill the SAP system. But that's all part of the presentation. With that, I would like to come to the area of announcements around events and educational stuff. So there is one thing that was announced now, I think it was already 2 weeks ago, Sapphire Now in 2021. Sapphire Now will again be a virtual event, and they SAP changed the setup. So there will be one global keynote by, of course, Christian Klein with special guests on June the 2nd. That's kind of the anchor of the event. And then you have several Sapphire Now events taking place at different dates and in different time zones, I hope, or regions where you can follow the different sessions. So there will be one Sapphire Now for EMEA, there will be one Sapphire Now for America, there will be one Sapphire Now for Asia Pacific. So that's quite interesting, and I'm looking forward. I think they SAP showed that they learned quite something from the experience, in quotes, from last year's Sapphire, as we saw at the TechEd. So now this might be a quite interesting event that's coming up. So you can't register yet, but you can sign up in order to be notified when registration is open. And then there's another webinar that I want to highlight that is kicked off by the Open Source Office of SAP. And I referenced the blog post that describes the content of the open source webinar series that they are offering. And there's also the link in there in order to register. So if you are interested what SAP is doing around the area of open source, and they're doing a lot, you are highly recommended to watch that webinar series. Maybe, hopefully, we even hear there that CAP will be open sourced, but I'm not super optimistic on that topic. Then let's go to the last section of today, developer productivity. There is one blog post that I would like to highlight. Microsoft is really doing a lot in the area of productivity in the positive sense, and how workers are dealing with the, let's say, changed surroundings that we have now since over a year, since the pandemic started. And there is a release now from Microsoft that tells you about the findings and the considerations that they have now after having the insight of a year of remote work. And that's a quite interesting read. Also quite interesting, I think, for HR people in the companies that we work for, because this kind of highlights some problems that arise and that you are definitely also aware of, like having tons of meetings and what happens to you with respect to this exhausting experience. And then there is one further blog post, of course, when it comes to productivity. Scott Hanselman is the man. And he highlights here another feature of Windows Terminal that allows you to implement custom commands that can then execute multiple actions in your Windows Terminal. So you have the option to enter or to define key bindings, not only by the keys per se, but also to bundle several commands in that are then executed, like opening a new tab, split the pane, and then open an Ubuntu shell. So that's quite helpful, I think, if you are a user of Windows Terminal. And with that, I'm at the end of this week's session. I hope I had some news for you. With that, I wish you a nice Easter weekend. Hope you have some time to relax, to re-energize. And yeah, see you next week. Until then, goodbye.